The Queen's funeral came with lots of pomp and VIPs, but it's the queue to see the Queen lying in state that will be remembered as the real success story of this period of national mourning. With hundreds of thousands of people queuing for up to 24 hours to see the Queen's coffin, it's hard to deny there was a significant well of affection for her. But the queue also became an attraction in and of itself.
Everybody's here for their parents and their grandparents of that generation that have done so much. And I mean, look at all these people. This is our little group. We've got a WhatsApp group, the Queen's Queue.
And how have you kept yourself busy during the night?
Talking to people.
Yeah.
Making friends.
Yeah.
Thinking about the Queen.
So you met in the queue. Tell me about it.
Yeah, we all turned up here first thing to want to pay our respects to Her Majesty and joined the queue back at Southwark Bridge and just struck up a conversation, and we've been chatting for the last 6 hours. And
Chatting, and we formed a little WhatsApp group and sent each other pictures of things that have shared pictures, things that have been happening, and it's been very lovely. It's been extra special to have met people.
Yes, there has been lots of talk of people making friends in their 13-hour or 6-hour or 20-hour waits to see the Queen. Lots of WhatsApp groups formed, of course. And there's been non-stop coverage of the queue, which hasn't always brought out the best in British journalism. This was a push notification from the BBC. Watch. David Beckham turns to crisps and donuts to keep him going in his wait to see the Queen lying in state. So cutting-edge public service journalism there. David Beckham, of course, earned lots of praise for queuing. Meanwhile, though, ITV's Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby became public enemies when they appeared to skip it. This Twitter user shared a screenshot of the pair and said, "Can we all agree that we're done with Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield?" It gets over 5,000 retweets. Another said, "This is a photo taken by my sister's husband yesterday after he had queued with my sister, their 10-year-old daughter and my disabled mum for 13 hours. My mum was ushered out of Holly Willoughby's and Philip Schofield's way so they could hashtag queue jumpers without even a thanks. Hashtag Schofieldgate, hashtag queue jumpers." Now, we can't verify the contents of that tweet, but in any case, the backlash was so big that ITV had to release a statement clarifying that Holly and Philip were only there for work purposes. Now, if Holly and Philip might have preferred not to be photographed, others went to great lengths to ensure there was evidence of their visits. This Tory councillor must have scrolled back iPlayer to find this footage of himself bowing for the Queen. Very, very genuine, I think, to go and pay your respects and then scroll back on the news so that you can tweet it out afterwards. But if that strikes you as pure cynicism, it's hard not to find the next video at least a little bit cute.
We met at like 10:30 last night. We've been with each other throughout the whole thing till now, yeah. We've actually got loads of things in common.
Yeah. So will you stay in touch?
Yeah,
100%.
We're going to the funeral on Monday together.
Are you?
Yeah.
And how are you feeling about that? The funeral's going to be...
I mean, it's going to be sort of mixed emotions, and it's sort of, I guess, something that is like part of history, so we want to be there and sort of share that moment, I guess, with someone else.
And how are you feeling about it? It's a huge day.
Well, it's pretty kind of going to be like somber, really, and the whole thing, like seeing the Queen go down like through to, is it Windsor? It's just be weird to see, really.
And how have you found being in this queue, no sleep?
Well, I don't know about you, but for me, I was like, meeting you guys was like a blessing in disguise, because it was like, I thought I was going to be exhausted, but like it's just gone so quickly in the queue.
How have you kept each other going? Have there been tricks of the trade?
No, just I guess like just like sharing stories, having laughs and like banter.
Good chat.
Yeah, good chat.
Great
yeah,
And
exactly.
Any snacks? You had any snacks?
What do we have?
Kettle crisps.
Yeah.
Croissants.
So the crisps and the chat have been crucial.
Yeah, made it.
It's got very first date vibes. He says kettle chips. Like, kettle chips. It's cute. I'm happy for them in any case, even if it's probably not my dating pool that the queue represents. Finally, this was a brief interview between Sophie Rayworth and two of the last people in the queue.
With me now, Sarah and Mark, who were, if not the last people, very much the last people
we were
in the queue last night. What was that like?
Amazing. I think it's the best thing I've ever done in my life. Even having my children, Lily and Luca, I think this tops that.
Our commiserations go out to Lily and Luca. Aaron, what's your take on the queue as a social and political phenomenon?
Well, I think in many ways it encapsulates some of the stranger things about Britain, and I think the first one being that it was clearly miserable, and people are presenting it as something euphoric and wonderful. I mean, I'm sure they want to go and see the Queen rest in state. I mean, they're obviously they can make a lot of time doing that, but I presume they would have preferred to have gone there within an hour or 2 hours, not have to wait 14, 15 hours, 24 hours. I think there was something like apparently 400 people had health complications while waiting, Michael. I mean, it's quite a lot of people. And of course, it was quite cold. So, look, I find it quite strange. There is also a part of me that thinks, this was managed in such a way to, of course, generate a more interesting sort of political spectacle for the audience and for history and for those watching from overseas. You could have had QR codes and people could come at certain times. Of course, you could have. That wouldn't have generated the spectacle, this visual sublime that, of course, the BBC and the Palace would have wanted. Understandably so, but it would have saved a lot of waiting for people. Look, Michael, there's a lot. I've said this repeatedly over the last 10 days. I don't understand this country anymore. When my dad came to this country in the late 1970s, it was a country of understatement, restraint, stiff upper lip. And now people sort of cry because their children tell them that they're going to be protected by the new king. And they say that waiting in a queue for 14 hours gave them more happiness than giving birth to 2 children. I don't understand these people, Michael. So maybe I'm not the best person to ask. Maybe you're going to get more wisdom and insight from the comments.
I think I disagree with you on people would have preferred it to have been a 1 hour wait, because I do think that people ended up going kind of for the queue. I mean, obviously, that these aren't going to be people who are like Republicans or who hate the Queen, but I don't think necessarily people thought, I really want to see the Queen and it's unfortunate there's a 13-hour queue. I think probably a lot of people went to see the Queen because they saw the queue. And I actually think, obviously I don't really back the reason they're queuing, but I respect that desire to be part of something communal and to stand next to strangers for 13 hours. Like it is often in those sort of difficult, awkward moments that are very memorable and you do make like quite long lasting relationships. I suppose you probably have similar memories that I do, Aaron, sort of like activism in our early 20s when you squat a building and you have to do something that's quite uncomfortable for a few hours. Someone brings in some food after 6 hours where you haven't had any and everyone's sort of sharing it. It's all quite charming and memorable. And I feel like this just gave people an excuse to do that. And I suppose why I think that's potentially politically relevant is because I feel like Republicans probably do need to have an answer as to where that's going to come from. Obviously, once every 70 years, getting to queue for 13 hours is not a huge advert for monarchism. But I do think there is a desire for people to be part of something collective. And I think if that is physically uncomfortable, that doesn't necessarily detract from it because it's the difficulty of doing it which brings people together. If it's comfortable, people won't start talking to each other. They get to laugh about how many kettle chips they had for 12 hours. It's kind of interaction people, I think, yearn for.
I think there's something to that, Michael. I mean, like you say, the idea of deferred gratification and perhaps the emotional investment given and actually finally walking past the coffin, I'm sure a lot of that was added to by the fact you've had to wait for 14, 15 hours in a queue. I mean, you're comparing it to squatting a building. I don't think I could stay on my feet for 15 hours and just shuffle along. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's really easy if you want to see something at the end of it. I do think you've hit on a really important point there, Michael, which is a lot of this is not, like you say, committed royalists and monarchists. I'm sure like the overwhelming majority of people going to this, of course, they support the royal family. But I don't think they're deeply emotionally invested in ideas of monarchism. I think they could vote for all parties and none. I think you'd have a range of sort of esoteric, wild opinions on virtually everything. I don't think it's a homogenous block of people. I agree with you. But what does bring them together, and I think this is generally underestimated by the left and Republicans, is the desire to be part of something bigger than themselves. And of course, the nation allows you to do that. Investment in the nation allows you to do that. What I don't understand, though, with the royal family, Michael, is, and it's put very well by Tom Nairn, is that most nations have a series of dynasties, right? So if you look at Iran, Persia, a series of dynasties. You've got most recently the Pahlavis, the Qajars, you've got the Achaemenids thousands of years ago, very famous from all the Greek expeditions and whatnot, the Parthians, the Sassanids. And of course, we've had many dynasties in this country, the Tudors, the Stuarts and whatnot. But with the House of Windsor and the modern royal family, it doesn't feel like it's a nation with a dynasty, but rather a dynasty with a nation, like the national bit's tied onto it. And I think that's what revolts me about it more than anything else. I've had criticism of monarchy anyway. But when, for instance, we have the armed forces not pledging allegiance to a people or a nation state, but a monarch and their successors, I don't see why people would be invested in that. Because it's almost like it comes from a place of believing in your own subordination and your unimportance. And so I suppose if you take what you're saying, which I agree with, and then that conclusion, you think, well, it should be quite easy for Republicans to be able to sell a vision of society and politics which is more alluring and attractive than this. I think it's certainly easier than they recognize, but that says a hell of a lot about the Republican movement, doesn't it? That actually people can get more enthused about waiting in a queue for 14 hours eating kettle chips than anything that the other side has to offer. And I think that's cause for reflection.